What if I told you that in the 1990s, Bethesda released half as many games for the Atari Jaguar as they did for the NES and Super NES combined? Well, it is true, though I admit it is somewhat misleading. In 1991, Bethesda released both Where's Waldo and Home Alone for the NES. They never released another game for a Nintendo console until Star Trek Tactical Assault for the Nintendo DS in 2006. In the meantime, Bethesda released a game called Protector for the Jaguar in 1999. So, needless to say, the two companies have taken entirely different paths through the game industry. For the vast majority of their history, Bethesda has focused their efforts on PC, with 33 of their 40 releases for the platform between 1986 and 1999. In contrast, Nintendo has technically never released a game on PC, though they have had their intellectual property used. For example, Mario's Time Machine and Mario is Missing were released on PC and Macintosh by Radical Entertainment in 1993 and 1994 respectively. However, neither of these games were either developed or published by Nintendo. This was also during the same time period that Nintendo allowed their intellectual property to be used by Philips for the CDI, resulting in the infamous Zelda games Nintendo wants you to forget about. Even the types of games Nintendo and Bethesda make couldn't really be more different. Bethesda's games focus on a core demographic of somewhat older gamers and are less, shall we say, family-oriented. In Nintendo, well, they maintained a squeaky clean image for decades that has only somewhat recently started to really go away. Still, given Bethesda and Nintendo's current happy relationship together, we will take a look at all of the games that Bethesda has published for Nintendo platforms. This relationship wasn't always so happy, so we will examine how we got to where we are today. We will also look at some of the comments Bethesda has made regarding Nintendo and its systems over the years, some good and some not so good. The very first Bethesda game ever released on a Nintendo platform was Where's Waldo. Not a great first title, Where's Waldo is an infamously bad title that typically ranks somewhere on worst NES games lists. Game Informer gave it a 1 out of 10, and it wasn't a great start for Bethesda games on home consoles. The second Bethesda game released for the NES was Home Alone, the video game tie-in to the hit movie of the same name. This was back in a time where properties were licensed out to numerous companies, so you'd see different versions of Aladdin or Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo and Genesis, for example. Home Alone was one of these games, with the NES release developed by Bethesda, while all other platforms had different developers. The NES version of the game released to middling reviews, though they were significantly better than Where's Waldo. Between 1991 and 2001, Bethesda didn't release any other games on home consoles, save the Atari Jaguar game Protector, which I spoke about earlier. In 2001, they released IHRA Drag Racing on the PlayStation, but their console existence really didn't take off until 2002's release of The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind on the Microsoft Xbox. At that time, the floodgates for console releases of their games opened up. Well, with the exception of Nintendo consoles, of course. After Home Alone in 1991, Bethesda didn't release a game that they actually developed on a Nintendo platform until The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, which released on the Nintendo Switch in November of 2017. They did, however, publish a handful of games for the Nintendo DS and Wii in the mid-2000s. In 2006, Bethesda published Star Trek Tactical Assault for the Nintendo DS. This was developed by Quicksilver Software, and the game was also released for the PlayStation Portable. It was a strategy game with 2 campaigns, one Starfleet and one Klingon. It released to mixed to negative reviews for both systems, hovering in the low to mid-60s on Metacritic. In 2007, Bethesda also published another Star Trek game, this time developed by 4J Studios. It was Star Trek Conquest, it too a strategy game, and it released on the Nintendo Wii and Sony PlayStation 2. Reviews for Conquest were even worse than Tactical Assaults, as it evidently failed at a more fundamental level and catered only to true hardcore strategy and Star Trek fans, obviously not a huge demographic. Finally, Bethesda published Wheelspin for the Nintendo Wii, but only in Europe. It was developed by Awesome Play and had a different publisher in North America. It is a racing game that released to generally terrible critic and user reviews. This was the last game Bethesda released on a Nintendo platform for a decade, while being only the 5th game they ever released on a Nintendo platform in their entire existence. To say the two companies had a detached relationship would be an understatement. However, in October of 2016, all of that changed. During the Nintendo Switch reveal trailer, Skyrim was prominently featured. This was a huge eye-opening reveal for gamers across the industry. Something had changed, but what was it? Before we get there, we should cover the intervening years between about 2006 and the reveal video in late 2016. During that time, Bethesda really grew into the AAA developer we recognize them as today, with releases like The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Also during this time period, the Wii was simply not powerful enough to run those games, but Nintendo did release the Wii U in late 2012, and well, people asked, with this theoretically new and more powerful hardware, would Bethesda be releasing any games for it? Pete Hines, Bethesda's senior vice president of marketing, issued a stark response to the question. He said, and I quote, "The time for convincing publishers and developers to support Wii U has long passed. The box is out. You have to do what Sony and Microsoft have been doing with us for a long time. It's not that every time we met with them we got all the answers that we wanted, but they involved us very early on, talking to folks like Bethesda and Gearbox saying, hey, here's what we're doing, here's what we're planning, here's how we think it's going to work, to here's what we thought from our tech guys and from an experience standpoint." Hines goes on to say, quote, "You have to spend an unbelievable amount of time upfront doing that. If you're going to sort of decide, well, we're going to make a box and this is how it's going to work and you should make games for it, well, no is my answer. I'm going to focus on other ones that better support what it is we're trying to do. You've got to spend more time trying to reach out to these folks before you even make the box when you're still designing it and thinking about how it's going to work." Later, he goes on to say, quote, "Pick the consoles that have the games you want to play. You shouldn't have ever bought a Wii U expecting to play great Bethesda games on there, because that's not something we'd ever supported in the past." We'll see how that changes down the road, if it does. It's more about the hardware and the audience and supporting yet another platform. And does it do everything the way the others do? If not, then usually it just doesn't make a lot of sense to spend that much time and attention on something that doesn't fit what you're doing. End quote. So there you have it. Nintendo and Bethesda's relationship as of 2013 could not have been worse. Later in 2013, Pete Hines appeared to soften his stance, but only a little. When asked about the Wii U and handheld games in general by Eurogamer, Hines had this to say, "We have nothing announced in development for Wii U. It's not something that we've done anything for previously. I don't even remember the last time we've done a Nintendo title. We don't have anything now. Whether or not we would in the future is TBD. As for why, I guess I'd rather not go into that." Regarding handheld games, he said, quote, "We don't have anything announced for the handhelds. Are there opportunities that could come up that would make some sense and be the kind of things we would want to do? Absolutely. But what we have going on right now doesn't fit with that." From that point on, Bethesda never really commented on Nintendo or Nintendo hardware again. It was assumed that the two companies, who never really had much of a past together anyway, would continue on their own paths, and that Bethesda games would not appear on a Nintendo console anytime in the foreseeable future. So, what happened between Bethesda and Nintendo for Skyrim to be prominently featured on the reveal trailer and for Todd Howard himself to appear at the official Switch reveal in January of 2017? According to the man himself, Todd Howard, in an interview with Glixel in March of 2017, Howard had this to say, quote, "When it comes to the Switch, Nintendo is the only company that can do that, right? When you hear that Nintendo is going to do a new platform, there's a lot of ways that can go. If you look at handheld gaming, they're still the best at it. If they say, we're going to make the best handheld ever and you can plug it into your TV, well, that's just really, really smart. I hope they do well, and it's a unique opportunity for us." End quote. Regarding how Nintendo approached Bethesda, Howard said, quote, "They came to us early about Skyrim, and we always wanted to work with them. Even though it's a game that people have played before and have known about for a long time, it's special for us to work with them. I think it was Nintendo of America who reached out to us. I wasn't the original point of contact. We met with some people from Japan, but it originally came from the American team. There was much more of a push this time to get the support. They have the kind of device that makes it much easier for third parties to give them the support." End quote. Later in 2017, Andrew Scharf, a lead producer at Bethesda, participated in an interview with Best Buy Canada where he commented on the Switch at length. When asked how Skyrim came to the Switch, he responded, quote, "The team here at BGS has been excited about the Switch and Nintendo's plans since we first saw the demo of the technology. That got us fired up about the possibilities, and as a broader company, we're always looking to expand our games to new platforms and new audiences. It was just a no-brainer to join a great partner like Nintendo and bring the massive world of Skyrim, where you can go anywhere and do anything, to a platform that can also go anywhere." End quote. When asked how it felt to be part of the reveal trailer, he said, quote, "It was very exciting. We've always dreamt of the opportunity to be able to bring the Elder Scrolls to a Nintendo platform, and with the Switch we were able to do not only that, but provide a way to play Skyrim a whole new way by being able to bring it anywhere. Nintendo's been a great partner, and it's been great to work with them." End quote. Finally, the interviewer wanted to know how Zelda content was added to the Switch version of Skyrim. He reveals that it was actually Todd Howard's idea. Quote, "It was early on in the project, shortly after we started developing on the Switch hardware, and Todd brought the idea up to Nintendo and the Legend of Zelda development team. They loved the idea and offered to work with us to make sure that our depiction of Link's champion's tunic, Hylian shield, and of course the Master Sword held true to their design, while being usable weapons and armor in Skyrim." End quote. The new partnership was off to a roaring start. Later in 2017, Nintendo revealed that 2 additional Bethesda games would arrive on the Switch, Doom 2016 and Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. This was a huge announcement and extremely surprising because, as of that time, no one actually believed that the Switch was anywhere near powerful enough to run either of those games. Skyrim made sense, as it was a last-generation game. Doom and Wolfenstein were current-generation games, and they were AAA experiences that pushed the hardware they were on, let alone the tiny Nintendo Switch. Pete Hines, when asked why Bethesda was focusing so much on the Switch, while other major publishers were taking a wait-and-see approach, said, quote, "We've been in constant conversation with Nintendo, and not just about the 2 games we have now, but about our whole approach to the platform going forward, what we can do, best practices, what things are that are a good fit, what they're excited about and what we're doing. We're obviously excited about these 2 games, but it's not as if we're going to just do these 2 games and that's it. We want this to be the start of a relationship that we build with Nintendo and Nintendo fans." End quote. The Nintendo perspective is often very difficult to find, as Nintendo doesn't often comment on anything other than their own games, let alone third-party developers. That said, the fact that North American president of Nintendo, Reggie Fils-Aime, specifically mentioned Bethesda in a 2017 interview with the Washington Post says a lot about how far the relationship between the 2 companies has come. When Reggie was asked how Nintendo was viewing third parties on the Switch, he had this to say, quote, "Let's start with third-party developers and further define that as the big third-party developers and publishers. We are thrilled that companies like Bethesda are bringing content to Nintendo Switch, sometimes for the first time on a Nintendo platform." End quote. That brings us full circle to late 2017. And so, though Skyrim had been shown nearly an entire year earlier, Bethesda's first Nintendo Switch game actually ended up being Doom, which released on November 10th, 2017. This marked the first game actually published by Bethesda to launch on a Nintendo platform in over 10 years. It was the complete package, save for the level editor being removed in the Switch version. It came with full online multiplayer in the entire campaign, and it actually played pretty well on the Switch. It was generally well reviewed and was received very well by the gaming community. Later patches to the game included gyroscopic aiming support, giving it an additional selling feature over other console versions of the game. So, after not releasing a game on a Nintendo console in over a decade, and that game being only the 6th game ever to be released on Nintendo hardware, Bethesda released their next game, Skyrim, just a week later on November 17th, 2017. This was a major release and topped the Nintendo eShop for a few weeks, staying near the top even months later. It was an extremely solid port of the game, complete with gyroscopic aiming and special Legend of Zelda gear, making the Switch port of Skyrim a unique addition to any collection and a game well worth owning. Reviews were generally very good, and the game remains popular on the Switch to this day, because taking Skyrim on the go is still something that many people have a hard time wrapping their head around. The experience holds true to what you'd expect, and the Switch version was built with the hardware in mind. That means it resembles the special edition version of the game at first glance, though some effects were pared back in the name of performance. Still, it looks amazing on the Switch's screen. Moving into 2018, Bethesda had already announced that Wolfenstein: The New Colossus would be coming to the Switch. By April, they had set the release date of June 29th, 2018. Much like Doom, this was another anticipated port because it seemed so counterintuitive that the diminutive Switch could run this game. It had, after all, been released a mere 7 months earlier on current generation consoles, and yet the Switch port of the game was solid and generally ran pretty well. It received good review scores, and this time gyroscopic aiming was included in the game from day one. The full Wolfenstein story and experience was available on the go, and Bethesda had released their 4th game for the Switch in about 6 months. What was the 3rd? Well, it was actually a Switch version of Fallout Shelter that Bethesda announced and released on the same day during E3 2018. So, not a major release, but still more evidence of the continued support for the Switch by Bethesda. However, in August 2018, during QuakeCon, Bethesda took it a step further and announced that the follow-up to Doom 2016, called Doom Eternal, was coming to the Switch as well, day and date with the other console and PC releases. We don't know how well Skyrim, Doom, and Wolfenstein sold on the Switch, but according to Pete Hines, Bethesda's games did very well. Specifically regarding Doom Eternal's immediate announcement for the Switch, Hines said, quote, "It was hugely popular, all of the stuff that we did. I think folks enjoyed and appreciated our games, and we wanted to make sure to say right up front that this is a title that we want to bring to Switch, and we think it's going to be another awesome experience." End quote. Pete Hines' comments about Bethesda's relationship with Nintendo and their attitude about the Switch really are a stunning turnaround from his stance in 2013. He took the opportunity during a panel at PAX Australia in 2018 to provide some commentary on Bethesda's overall view of the Switch, porting games to it, and finding willing partners to help. He had this to say, quote, "So the idea of being able to take something like what we did, looking at the tech specs and going, that's actually really close to what we kind of do now. That was always the big barrier for us with the Nintendo stuff. It wasn't that we didn't like the Wii or we don't like this. It was just, this is the stuff that we make, and as many things as will run that, we'll do it. So, as we looked at the specs, we started looking at games like Skyrim and Doom and Wolfenstein, and we were fortunate enough to either have really talented devs who were also very keen on making it, which I think is important, or finding a great partner in Panic Button who had the ability to take what we were doing and say, yeah, we can make that happen on a Switch." End quote. Asked specifically about Doom and Wolfenstein being ported to the platform, Hines said, quote, "The benefit for us was that id Tech 6 was really built, and we knew about the Switch during the development of Doom 2016, so they were able to make some of the choices to make sure that it was scalable so that it would sort of not be too far out of line with what the Switch was doing. The benefit there was that it allowed both Doom 2016 to happen on the Switch as well as Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, because that was built off of the tech that ran Doom 2016, so that was sort of a 2-for-1 there. And that's also why the next Wolfenstein is going to be out on the Switch as well, and that's why Doom Eternal was announced. In that case, not just as a port, but as something that, for the first time, we're building a game from scratch that really has the Switch in mind. That was honestly... That tech allowed us to do a lot of things across 2 different franchises. I don't know how the hell they made Skyrim run on the Switch, but they did it. It looks great, it's fun. I have played more Skyrim than a lot of people, but I still play it on my Switch because it turns out it's pretty cool to be sitting on a plane and fighting a dragon." End quote. Pete Hines even went on record saying that Bethesda has been in contact with Nintendo about potentially having Doom Guy appear in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's hard to find a bigger turnaround in the video game world than Nintendo and Bethesda's. Possibly Nintendo and Square, but they mended bridges comparatively quickly compared to the barren wasteland that was Bethesda releases on Nintendo consoles. So, what does the future hold for this new relationship between Nintendo and Bethesda? Well, going back to Pete Hines, here's what Bethesda's thought process is when it comes to their games releasing on the Switch. Quote, "We've always gotten on really well with Nintendo. It's just a question of, do the games that we make, technically, are they a fit for the platforms that they're making? In the past, the simple answer has been no. Like, Skyrim did not run on anything that Nintendo was making. Could we have changed a bunch of stuff to make it work? Maybe, but that's not our approach. But in the case of the Switch, the game, as we made it, does it run on this? Yeah, it does. It runs well. And so Skyrim, Wolf, Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Fallout Shelter, Elder Scrolls Legends, all of those are things that we've said, look, this either can or will run well on the Switch. And we continue to look at every game that we make because we want as many people to play it as possible. I have my Switch with me here in Germany. I think it's great to be able to take games you love with you." End quote. There you have it. And there's more to come. In addition to the previously confirmed Elder Scrolls Legends, titles such as Wolfenstein Youngblood, Doom Eternal, and the Elder Scrolls Blades are all coming to the Switch. As the Switch continues to get more and more popular, Bethesda has positioned itself uniquely as one of the biggest supporters of the console, and also one of the few AAA publishers ready to take full advantage. With tens of millions of Switches sold, and counting, Bethesda is set to reap the rewards. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching.